In welcoming our guests onto the dais, we have with us Dr. Renu Swaroop, former Secretary, Department of Biotechnology, Ministry of Science and Technology. Welcome, ma'am. This session will be moderated by Dr. Vibhav Garg, Director, Government Affairs Strategy, India Hub and ASEAN at Boston Scientific. We have Mr. Naveen Kumar, Special Secretary, IIS Health, Medical and Family Welfare at the Government of Andhra Pradesh. Mr. Himanshu Baid, Chairman, CII National Medical Technology Forum and Managing Director, Plenary Med. And we have Mr. Sai Prasad, Co-Chairman, CII National Committee on Biotechnology and Executive Director at Bharat Biotech. Thank you so much. I'll hand it over to Vibhav to please take it forward.
Thank you, Kangshita. Very good afternoon, everyone. I know it's a session post-lunch, so I'll try and make it as interesting as possible so that you don't fall asleep. But, I have a wonderful panel with me to talk about a very contextual area, which is the theme of the session. Disruption is pharma and medtech and moving up the value chain. I think it's a very contextual in the form that, or in the way that, if you see last, I think about 10 years, medtech industry in India has really evolved, right? And my panelists sitting with me will talk about it more, but I think the evolution in medtech has been tremendous from the industry which used to be driven only by like consumables and disposables, and now we are getting into where we have a lot of manufacturers in the company talking about high-end, high-risk devices. So Himanshu, my panelist, who leads Polymed, will talk about it. But at the same time, if we see the evolution of the biotechnology industry in the country, and who better than Dr. Renu Swaroop, who is with me on the panel, who led the Department of Biotechnology in Government of India, drove that entire wave of growing this industry entirely, supporting this industry. We'll hear from her as well how this evolution has been and how India as a country has really moved from value chain perspective towards upstream, right? I think that's very important. And then, of course, we have Mr. Naveen Kumar, who is IAS officer with the Andhra Pradesh government and a special secretary with the Ministry of Health and Family Welfare and Education. I think he brings in that perspective of state, how state is looking at these, the moving up value chain of the industry and how they intend to utilize this transformation in the medtech industry and in the biotech industry and the pharma industry. And we were supposed to have Ms. Aparna, the Secretary Pharma, but I think unfortunately she was busy. But I will take the liberty of having the presence of Dr. Renu Swaroop to also pose a couple of questions on pharma as well, ma'am. I'm sure you have the insights of government, how it is looking at the pharma as well. But with that, I think, I have a very eminent panel, as you can see. And with that, I would also like to sort of, give a disclaimer that while I'll try and make this session as interesting as possible, but anybody who is wanting to take a nice nap after lunch, please feel free, right? So that's just a disclaimer from my side. With that, thank you so much, CII, for having me to moderate this session. And I will actually start with Dr. Renu. She has been at the helm of things when it comes to DBT and, of course, government thinking. And at one point in time, actually, the last decade was actually called as bioeconomy, where we talked about it, ma'am, right? That India has a bioeconomy which will be to certain numbers. And of course, that included, biotechnology, biopharmaceuticals, and vaccines, and so on and so forth. So, ma'am, we saw that India is called as generic pharmacy of the world, right? And then, of course, in fact, we as a country launched our similar biologics policy even before US, right? Before they brought their biosimilar policy. In fact, I was part of that launch in US Bio when Dr. Bhan actually launched it. It's amazing work. Now, having all these things in place, where do you see India as a country standing, right, in the global framework, when we talk about the value chain and what needs to be done more so that this movement on the value chain, when we are moving up in the value chain, will actually bring the right kind of focus back to the country so that industry gets, or industry adds back to that growth. And also we are trying to take the country to the right levels in the global sort of market, whether it is pharma or biotechnology for that matter. So your thoughts on that, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Weber, for this. And first of all, CII, again, compliments to them for bringing in very important issues for discussion and consideration in fora like this, where you can have everyone's views. And we hope that, as always, the CII recommendations will come up as a wonderful document, which will then go to the government for taking it ahead. So thank you. It's always a pleasure to be with you here. I think, Weber, you brought out a very important point, and referring to the biologics and saying that India today, India is recognized as the pharma hub. We do know that. Also saying that in this whole journey, where do we see India positioned today? Where do we see India in the next couple of years? And what have been those key factors which have contributed to this? So in the last over 2.5 years, whenever I speak at any fora, I obviously, and I think all of us, immediately refer to the COVID if you're talking about the pharma sector. Because, you know, for many years, and you rightly said it, for over a decade now, we did put in a lot of effort in consultation with the industry, with all stakeholders, with the research groups, the academia, the startups, to try and see how we develop a very robust framework, both in terms of the enabling policies, which will facilitate it, and enabling and empowering ecosystem, which will allow it to move ahead, and creating a sort of a bridge between all the various stakeholders so that we can deliver. And then the COVID came as a test case for us, as a test bed, as we say, for us to test out all this, where we were caught unawares. It came suddenly, but we responded. And today, we were always the vaccine manufacturers of the world, and with Sai Prasad sitting on my left, I mean, he's, I'm sure, going to speak about it in his discussion, but India's position as a vaccine manufacturer was always well recognized, with 1 in 3 children, as we always say, receiving vaccines from India, and also the largest number of WHO pre-qualified vaccines which were available. So this was where we had a wonderful example where we made vaccines in India, not just for our Indian population, but for across the world. COVID gave us an opportunity where India was also then recognized for the R&D aspects of its vaccine development. The platforms that we had, yes, of course, the example that we have of Covaxin and Covishield, which have immunized a billion population with not just 2 doses, but also the booster, and also supplying to other countries, is a globally recognized case. Today, India does not have to go and say that we will be globally there. They are recognized globally. And that has been, again, if you go back and look at the story, there was a whole enabling ecosystem that we created for vaccines. And that is really what then gave us this platform to deliver. Similar work or efforts are going on for the entire pharma sector. Whether it's the generics that we are talking about, or whether it's the medtech sector that we are talking about. And of course, now in the recent years, we've also been focusing on many of the disruptive new technologies. But I think that is what is to be taken forward. The government has very clearly over the last decade been in the focus, conveyed very clearly to all the stakeholders, and all of you sitting on the panel here have been part of that, you know, what we've worked out is as a catalyst, as an enabler, to try and see how we focus on building capacities, And those capacities, when I say, were in terms of the human resource, the skilled workforce, because without that you really can't do anything at all. Infrastructure, capacities for the research resources, the shared infrastructure, access, and that has actually multiplied, I don't know how many times during the COVID times, because where we felt the gap, where we felt that we did not have sufficient animal facilities, we put them in place. Where we felt we did not have sufficient repositories, we put them in place. So looking at that. And then the second major aspect was, how do we foster and nurture a very robust ecosystem that allows for it. And in that ecosystem, you need to connect with the entire value chain. And that value chain, when I say, is right from the research, basic discovery research, which is so very important if India has to be seen as an innovation R&D center, and you have to capture global markets for disruptive technologies. You look at the R&D which is in the laboratories of the academia, connecting it through the startup ecosystem to the large industries. And today, it's a matter of great satisfaction that I say we actually have covered all those aspects. From research to translation, to helping the startups to grow, and also facilitating now the large-scale manufacturing, also working with agencies which are engaged in it, with industry bodies like CII and FICCI, to see how we could look at markets, both domestic and global markets, and also trying to see how we help them to capture those niche area global markets. So today India is recognized. I think your question was, if we are there, what else do we need to do to move forward? My one simple response to that would be, sustain what we have done, but we also have to recognize this, that India today is positioned for an exponential growth. It's not an incremental value chain increase that we have to put in. We have already reached that level where we could look at exponential growth. So if you have to look at exponential growth, definitely the impact that you have to make, the policy changes that you have to bring, have to be multiplied number of fold to take it forward. The most important policy imperative that we brought in, which was, in my view, a real game changer, was when the government came forward to see that they also become partners in investment for the startup and the industry. The government had invested a lot in creating the foundations of R&D. Our whole academic research platform, translational centers, clusters that we created, and these were biotech with a major focus on pharma. 60% of our biotech, if you look at the bioeconomy, comes from biopharma. But I think looking at, or even putting out an intent that we have an appetite for high-risk investment, was a clear message and intent that went out, which has been able to bring in a lot of investors. Today, it's a matter of great satisfaction and pride for us that in the biotech sector, when we started with hardly 50 startups 10 years back, today we have over 5,000. The bioeconomy that you're talking about, right from 2007, when we put our policy and we made the first intent saying 30% of our funding will go to PPP. That's when BIRAC came into it. And that 30% we started the BIRAC initiative. Today we are continuing with that. We had a policy and strategy in 2015. We then brought out a strategy in 2020, each one of them building upon what we had done earlier. And today we are talking about the bioeconomy growth of 150. If you look at it in the last year, in the COVID year, it's very, very satisfying to see that we had more than 1,200 startups who came up in this COVID year. That's nearly 3 startups each day. If you look at the investments which have happened, and that's all, of course, because of the vaccines and the diagnostics which took on the market, but there's been a huge investment. So I think if we just keep our focus on these 3 clear aspects, where the government becomes a catalyst and an enabler, but the government cannot do it alone. The government has to do it with all stakeholders, and industry is a very, very major stakeholder, working on capacities, working on the ecosystem, working on investment opportunities, and most importantly, acknowledging that we have to look at high-risk investment. Otherwise, you lose that niche area advantage. And looking at, if you come into the market late, you've lost that advantage. And disruptive technologies do require timely action to be able to reach there on time. So I think that's really where we need to focus on.
So thanks a lot, ma'am. I think a lot of insights into what has been done and what can be done more. And I think, so Sai Prasad, I come to you, just a connecting question. And ma'am talked about, right, sustain what we have and look for exponential growth with the disruptive technologies, right? And your company led the way during COVID, right? Now, given, okay, COVID was like one of the situation, but including COVID, if you see the market growth that we have seen, what's your takeaway as to the ma'am referring to that exponential growth? What is that exponential growth to you means? And what do you think should be done to really move up the value chain during that exponential growth that we are talking about? Over to you.
Sure. Thanks, Vaibhav. Thanks, CII, for inviting us to be a part of this panel. Thank you, ma'am, for joining us. I know how busy you are. I think, exponential growth is one thing because there is a lot of global, I guess I would say, tailwinds for us as a country right now. We are in a good place. Our economy is doing well. I think COVID, we have left it behind. Many thanks to the efforts of Madam Renu Swaroop and the Government of India and many other industry and many other members in the country. As you can compare that with China, we always compare ourselves with China, and you can now compare and see what's happening in China with their zero COVID policy and where it has led to. I think India is in a good place. I think we have to think about growth. When we think about growth, we can think about manufacturing-led growth or innovation-driven growth. These require different types of, I would say, investments and mindsets and mentalities. Innovation-driven growth does not happen overnight. Either industry or the ecosystem has to be working on any kinds of incremental innovation that's feasible at any given point in time without expecting that innovation that they're spending, maybe a few lakhs or a few crores based on the size of the company, that would yield them any return. I think that's a fundamental concept that many companies and industries have to think about and understand it. Everything that you do in R&D or innovation may or may not yield you a return, but that does teach you something. That when push comes to shove, as ma'am was mentioning, we as a company or we as an industry in vaccines, we were able to respond to it because as an industry, we've been doing this, incremental innovations, doing R&D tinkering, product profile tinkering. So all that we could bring to bear and develop a new product from scratch within 12 months or 18 months with the clinical trials, with the product development, with the formulations. So that expertise is there because we were doing all of this incremental innovation, before that. I think in terms of manufacturing, we were just having a side conversation off stage. And I think this decade, in the next 10 or 15 years, is really going to define our country for the next 50 years, I would say. I mean, if we don't get this manufacturing expansion of our country right in the next 5, 10, 15 years, I don't think we'll ever get it. There is an impetus, global impetus for the entire world looking at us. We are in a good place. We are having a good local market also. Domestic market is good. It's a unified market. It's not split across all our states. It's a country, it's a unified market. But we just have to move up the value chain in not just innovation and R&D, but large-scale manufacturing and also quality management. The only concept that I would leave behind, and I think I want everybody to think about, is that we have to start losing our fear of failure. We think too much about failure and keep thinking that what happens if we do that? Our company invests a few crores in that, and if we fail, what happens? I don't think we are not in a situation of 20, 30 years ago as a country or as an industry that we have to think about, dire consequences if there is a failure. A great example is we were just speaking at lunch with ma'am about how the COVID Suraksha program from the Department of Biotechnology, gave us funding to conduct our research for our intranasal vaccine. We just announced it yesterday. We got the approval last week. So today there is no demand for a COVID vaccine, but we believe in that platform. We think if that platform is successful, it can help us deliver other antigens, in an easy manner. So we were not worried about our investments. The government was not worried about their investments. So we thought we have to invest in this platform technology so that we'll be ready for the next antigen or next product that we need to deliver. So please lose that fear of failure. Thank you.
Thanks, Sai. I think very well said and very well summarized. Lose the fear of failure. Very, very important, because I think that's the crux of R&D, if I may say so, right? I mean, if you are fearing of failure of R&D, you will not invest in R&D, and that has been the real challenge in many segments in the country, right? And I think as a country, we had to sort of get into that mode of investment. And as you rightly pointed, ma'am, these are not short-term, small investment. These are longer-term, deeper pockets investment. I think that's where we as a country need to sort of start thinking, both government and the industry. But let me shift the gears a little bit here and move from biotech and bioeconomy to medtech and medtech economy. I have a good fortune to have Himanshu with us, who is chair for National Medical Technology Forum of CII, and also the MD for a company which is the largest exporter of medical devices. And Himanshu, I think my question to you is, medtech in India is still, is taken as I think a lot of bets by government on this sector we have seen, right? Sunrise sector in last 5 years, it has been the kind of focus it is getting, sometimes unwanted, by the way. But then kind of focus it is getting from various ministries is tremendous. In fact, Birect got into medical devices very early on, from a impetus perspective. So from medtech value chain, when we talk about, right, we still, I think, India is almost self-sufficing the need in consumable segment and in sort of disposable segment. But when India is looking at moving up the value chain, I mean, I'm talking about India as a country from an entire industry perspective, how important role the disruptive technologies are playing. When we talk about disruptive technology, I'm referring to robotics, artificial intelligence, 3D manufacturing, telehealth, and so on and so forth. So your thoughts on that, how these technologies will pave the way for entire medtech industry moving up the value chain in medical devices? Your thoughts, Himanshu.
Thanks, Vibha. Good afternoon, everyone. I think, Vibha, it's a very important question, because currently when we look at India, we are still probably at class A and class B products. And probably there we have a little bit of self-sufficiency, maybe in our after COVID, post-COVID. Today we are able to make a lot of these diagnostic kits in India, which were almost importing everything, before COVID. So a lot of things have changed. Now, when we try to move up the value chain, I think India was not manufacturing the critical medical equipments. And after this PLI scheme, which was announced, and I think government was very clear in that mindset that it should be for products which we are importing today. Technologies which are not in India have to be developed in India. I think with that focus, I think a lot of those equipments which are part of the PLI scheme, a lot of those products which are part of the PLI scheme were based on futuristic technologies. Whether you look at all radiation equipment, your Linacs and all that stuff, it's all was part of PLI, which was never thought about making in India. We look at C-arms now getting manufactured. There are a few companies in India which are making C-arms now. And there are a few more which are going to make. So, and they are pretty successful. They're exporting to around 40, 50 countries. When you look at 3D printing, Andhra Pradesh has taken a lead. Yeah, where I think you have more than 30, 40 machines doing 3D printings for body parts or even for, implants, whatever are necessary. So I think that's the new futuristic technology happening. DBT invested a lot in Kalam Institute of Technology, which has now become one of the global technological centers of India, where a lot of technology is evolving. And when we look at robotics today, I think today in US, at least 10 to 15% surgeries are happening through robotics. And I think that's the way forward. India still doesn't have too many of these Da Vinci robots, which are too expensive today, 12, 15, 20 crores. But I think as time progresses, I think the robots will get cheaper and cheaper. And I think India would also see this robotic surgeries, which are very precise, which lead less time for recovery. You can go to places where doctors can't see, can't go. So all these will happen actually. This is already happening, but I think the acceleration has started already. I think that's the important point here. Telemedicine, I think, was a big game changer during COVID, I think. In the session before in the morning, I think Shobna Madam was telling already that Apollo could see additional 20 million patients because of telemedicine, which was completely unheard of earlier. In India, telemedicine was like very, a remote word. I think people are thinking telemedicine is for people who are overseas and we are doing medical prescription or transcriptions for them. But here, completely the game has changed, I think. And that has accelerated, I think, the growth of healthcare to remote areas. Now you see drones delivering medicines. Uttarakhand, we've already seen that. I was reading a story about drones. I think they are developing drones which can carry people. One single person can be carried on a drone for 20, 30 kilometers and to be sent to a hospital. So that's the next big thing which is going to happen. So I think a lot of technological advancements will come up in medtech. Manufacturing will drive it because that will make the cost lower. India, I think, has the lowest cost of manufacturing in the world today. Because I'm a manufacturer, I know that. We run plant also in Egypt, India, and Italy and China. And I can give you a comparison very well that today China is 3 times more expensive than India to make medical devices, especially when you are making consumable medical devices. So I think India has taken that leap. I think I agree with Sai exactly what you said. It's our decade of manufacturing. Let's invest in technologies, future technologies, which we have already seen in the West in last 5-10 years, developed so rapidly, with a lot of AI coming in, VR coming in, augmented reality. I've seen cataract surgeries where a lot of AR is happening, VR is happening, where doctors are not even looking at the patient. They're just looking at the screen and doing the surgery. Yeah, and they're much faster, we can do like 20 surgeries in, like 40 minutes or 50 minutes. So that's the speed which is this technology is building into treatment care. So a lot of things will happen in India, I think, and the journey has just started. Yeah.
Thank you, Himanshu. I think you have given a lot of ray of hope to young entrepreneurs in the room, I'm sure, who are hearing you. The kind of decade of India from manufacturing perspective, and I completely am sold to that idea because the kind of talent, as ma'am talked about, we are producing today, and particularly the interdisciplinary talent that we are producing. Recently I came across a discussion, want to share with everyone. State of, I think Haryana is now getting into a degree, ma'am, where 2 years in engineering college and 2 years medical college, right? So that's the kind of degree they are coming up with for, and they're not calling them biomedical engineers.
What do you call them?
That's a fight actually, but I am saying that there is a thinking now that this sector needs that kind of education system where you can bring the talent from both sides of it. So thanks for that. I come to you, Mr. Naveen, and I think you bring a very different angle of a state government representing on the panel. So when a company would like to, sort of move up the value chain, say, okay, today I'm manufacturing consumable disposables. Tomorrow, let me start investing into, say, implants, say, radiology equipment and so on and so forth, which is getting up, or therapeutic radiology for that matter. I think the first question comes in mind is, will I get paid enough, sufficiently, smartly for my investments? My ROI will be there or not? So you have been a state who has been pioneer in health scheme, right? 2007, nobody thought about a health scheme, by the way. It's 2007, right, if I'm not wrong. 15 years you are running a health scheme successfully, right? And I think a lot of states sort of adopted this model. But having said that, as a state, where do you see this moving up the value chain, sort of a concept from a company perspective who come to you and say, yeah, these are technologies I'm manufacturing or I'm foraying into. How do you see that, and what do you have as a state to sort of support these kind of, moving up the value chain ideas of companies who are reaching out to this scheme? What do you, sir? Thank you.
Thank you, Vibhavji. To complete what he talked about, Himanshuji, what he talked about this Da Vinci robotic surgery, right? In fact, I think you might not be aware. There is an Indian engineer who is already creating a similar surgical device in the country. We have about 200 engineers sitting here in Haryana. I think Gurgaon somewhere is doing it. And this came from a leading doctor in Hyderabad. He told me about this. In fact, I'm also told the director of innovation from Da Vinci has already shifted to this Indian startup. So that is the good news for you can imagine that has already started this revolution. When yesterday we spoke about I call it the unicorn of medtechs will come in India. So there is also a reluctance to accept because I am the youngest one in this entire panel, so I should be very optimistic. because I have another 20 years in government, so I should be very optimistic when I say this. So the things which I've seen when we started in IT, I also come from a very strong IT background in the government, things have moved up. And whatever, when I was just thinking in the morning, when people talk about the New India, I'm a part of New India. It's not, I think ma'am is from the transition India, but I am clearly part of the New India. So which has, the story of New India is what the vaccine production in this country, we have defeated a pandemic. I think it is the only country which has successfully defeated this pandemic by effectively roping in a lot of stories. When you talk about, bureaucracy, the industry coming together, there's always this negativity which comes around this entire, telling people this would not work in the country. And I think we also have this narrative put in our minds. I think, show me which country has done better than this country in this entire COVID. So that is a story which we are talking about. We should be very proud at this moment when you talk about this New India. And we are learning. It's not that the point when somebody asks me this question, what are we doing at this moment? We are progressing. That's more important. We are not going backwards, right? As a country, we are moving forward. Maybe be it pharma, be it medtech. Think of the same thing which has happened. I think when Bati started in this country, that was the first pharma hub in this country way back. But now we have so many pharma hubs in the country. We have Hyderabad there. You talk about mobile manufacturing. Noida is there next door. So these are things which are growing. What I also see is there's enough pool of talent in the country itself. And I think the last panel used a term called mixology. So I think that is what we need, the mixology, the medical students, the engineers, the design engineers. In fact, I went to a university last week where they were talking about a neonatal ventilator developed by design engineers. So these are the things which you are talking about. And I think there's enormous opportunity for, I have a use case which I keep repeating again and again. Why do you need digital technology at the end of your enabler, right? So when ma'am talked about it, catalyst and enabler, these are the 2 points she kept on repeating again and again. I think that is what government will do for the next 10 years, putting you guys, whoever is there, I think when you come to us, we are ready to, I think that's the perspective of New India is to accommodate ideas. I think that's the first thing which we have learned. And this is the case study I keep telling. Look at a person in Paderu, there is a doctor or a lab technician who can collect a digital ECG. These goes through a machine, and the machine reads all those ECGs, and those ECGs which are supposed to be read by a cardiologist will go to him through the same machine. And again, the machine is learning it. But doing this, you're also effectively reducing the cost of your cardiologist or the digital devices. I think innovations like this, I think when we started, we were also talking about a MedTech challenge in association with the NHA. So there are things which we can do. There is a platform we already have. You already have a solution. So how do we connect this platform and the solution? That's the first stage. And then how can we go incremental? There are wearables, consumables which we can think of. Third would be to seek problems. In fact, the doctor sitting there or the technician sitting there would not know that there is a solution. How do we put people there in the premises to look for, there is this emerging concept called design thinking, right? So we can also think of people talk about design thinking, sitting there, asking questions, why can't we do this way? And we should enable it. I think ma'am also talked about capacity. I think it's also capacity and ability to, strengthen our entire medical system to ask questions. And I think I completely agree with what Sai Prasad Garu told, and you should never fear failure. I'm one person, I think I'm in my 20th year of government. The same remarks I keep getting, when I joined government, they say it's not that easy, right? But it's easy to do it in government than private. I'm very proud when I sit here. There are things you can scale, and like you talked about things which, the Arogyashri, which is 2007, right? So there was a scheme in the country, I think Obamacare came pretty later than what we did. And these are things which we do in this country are unimaginable, and what we have done, what we have achieved. Only thing is that there is a narrative around the entire thing saying that it has not happened. I'm very proud of, when I say this, these are the strong points of this country. I think there is a very definite future. I'm very sure that everybody agreed on this. There's a manufacturing, and the medtech would be, the digi medtech would be one of those things which come. I simply put it, if it works in India, you'll earn profits abroad, and you can also scale it to African countries. So you are in the middle of the continuum, right? So it's very easy to push your market. And India, when you talk about India, it's a huge market. I'll put a very small example. There is a drink called kombucha. You wouldn't have heard of it before COVID, right? So, but you go to Chennai, there is a lot of kombucha makers in the, I think that's, in fact, I went to Hyderabad, they showed me a Bionest pharma company. So they were doing this very serious enzyme, separating. I told the director, Professor Redden, I told him, sir, why don't you start kombucha business? So it's because it is profitable and he'll scale it. There are a lot of products which will come in this. In fact, if you fly an Indigo flight these days, they'll give you a protein bar also. I think it started 2-3 months back. So these are markets not just for, these are health-related markets. We don't think that kombucha is a health-related market or a protein bar is a health-related market. These are market which is growing and there is a phenomenal opportunity for everyone. I think the disruption would be the health disruption which would happen this next 10 years or 50 years from now.
Thank you, Naveenji. I'm not sure, but your capacity utilization of your thoughts can be better in the industry, by the way. So keep yourself available for us. Thank you for those innovative thoughts. I had one follow-up question to all the panelists, but then I'm taking a detour, and I'm asking a very out-of-syllabus question to all of you, right? And the question should be relevant to your respective. So, ma'am, you may talk about the policy perspective, if you can think through. My question is, when we talk about disruption in pharma or medtech, right? And that disruption making or helping the industry move up the value chain. So, say, Sai, for your perspective, what that disruption from an industry perspective should be, or is there already, which will actually make it happen? Ma'am, maybe from a policy perspective, you think through what that disruption can, what policy can bring that disruption, and or whether the policy itself is a disruption actually, right? Similarly, sir, for you, what could be the disruption similarly for you? And in the meantime, audience, please keep your questions ready for the panel. We'll open the panel right after this out-of-syllabus question from all the panelists. So keep your question ready. So we'll start with Sai, with you.
Thank you, Vaibhav. I think, disruption, when we think of it, we like that term, we love that term. We think about it, I think, on a daily or a weekly basis. But the only concept that we think of is that we have to do disruption, but we have to do it ourselves. If we don't do it ourselves, somebody else will do it for you and they'll have your lunch. So I think we're thinking about what we should do to make our existing offerings or products or services better, and what should we do to make it better. I think that's a constant endeavor in our organization, whether it is this vaccine or any other vaccine, or is it the molecular biology of it, if it's the formulation or the delivery systems. A simple concept we can think of, maybe Himanshu would be a little bit upset with me, when we looked at delivery devices for our intranasal vaccine, right? The existing devices by Becton Dickinson and all the other companies, which is a nasal spray for intranasal vaccines, it's almost $1 a dose, $1 a piece. It's 85 cents, 90 cents US. So we said this won't work for our country. Ma'am knows about this. We said this won't work, it won't work. I might make a beautiful vaccine, it'll be for rich people, but government cannot introduce it at that price point. So we said we'll have to come up with a dropper. So now we administer our intranasal vaccine with a dropper that costs maybe 5 paisa or 10 paisa or something like that. It's a similar dropper but then you need to think beyond what the multinationals have done in US or Europe. They've only administered intranasal vaccines through a nasal spray. And you have to think that, I'm going to go against that grain and do it as a dropper and deliver it as drops. And so I think we have to think along those lines, and so we have to disrupt ourselves.
Sure.
Thank you.
Sai, absolutely a brilliant example of disruption. I think it's absolute. How you want, the disruption is all about changing the rule of the game, basically, right? And unless you do that, you won't really get to what you want to do, basically. So thanks for that example. Ma'am, what do you please?
So disruption is something that, it's relative. Today what we are talking about was disruptive 10 years back. So if what we are thinking about today is going to be what's going to be disruptive 10 years from now. So I think this has to be a dynamically moving process, and you have to look at disruption in every aspect, and whether it's the processes that you work on, or whether it's the programs and the schemes that you bring out, or the policies that you take forward. Because if you're going to encourage disruptive technologies, those technologies could be across the spectrum. And only unless you bring it across the spectrum, it's going to be possible. See, the disruption that we brought in is what I just mentioned to you, is that you never had the government being an investment partner with industry. That was the first major disruption that we brought in into the program, and today it's huge. So that was an absolutely out-of-box idea that was thought about, and many of you who've been engaged, you know that Dr. Mahan and myself, when we were working onto it, we sat and we looked at it and put it into our policies, but yes, it worked. The government took it, we took it forward, we took it into a cabinet. So I think what has to move, if we have to take it forward, is to continuously keep looking at newer ideas. My most important message to everybody here is not just the policy or the entrepreneurs of the industry. Keep moving out of your comfort zone. Because the moment you get too comfortable in a particular zone, then that's time for you to move out and look at newer ideas. One disruption that's immediately required is, which we've been working on many days, is we need to really we've blurred the boundaries between industry and academia. We need to break those boundaries. There have to be no boundaries. A lab is a lab. A research is a research, irrespective of where it's done. The scientist cannot, we say science has no boundaries. We say science has no borders. There's a planet. And here in the planet, in a country, we are putting boundaries and saying this is private research, this is public research, this is startup research. So just break boundaries between all this, and that is the major disruption we will do. And you'll see science will flow seamlessly across, and it will help you to move up in the value chain.
Certainly, ma'am. I think this will be the biggest disruption if we can, and you said it very beautifully, we have blurred it, but let's remove it actually, right? I think very, very important area. And if we are able to do that, and we all know that globally, that very important innovations come from very boutique setups actually, right? Whether it is academia or industry for that matter. So I think that has to be the norm now as well in our country. So thank you for that, ma'am. Naveenji, over to you. Disruption for you, maybe at a state level or whatever you're thinking.
Collaborate to disrupt, that's the logo. I think when you talk about, I think I can see CII in front of me, so I can read it like collaboration of Indian government and the industry, right? So you do it that way. So how do I talk about collaborate? In fact, I was actually literally ragged in one of those, there was a biodesign competition, so they kept on asking me, what is government doing about the innovators, right? So there are innovations which are homemade innovations, and these are innovations which are working in UK, and we are not adopted. In fact, that is something which at the policy making level. So in fact, yesterday when we had a round of talk with the other industry group also and with CII, this was one thing. When somebody comes to me, I ask only one question. So I'm an engineer myself, I'm a technocrat, so proof of concept is not the solution. It is the proof of value. How does that, the entire, your system, how do you see your innovation plugs into the system and can deliver those things, reduce cost. When I talked about my use case, I can put a number to it. I can always say that it is as good as that LED example. I keep telling how did LED come to this country? They kept on telling you, okay, all those energy savings you have, you pay us. And no more, 10 years back that was the strategy. Now nobody asks of that, the value proposition. So you should, I think ma'am talked about it, that value proposition should come in. The innovation without value proposition is meaningless. I think that is where, I think the collaboration would be where there is a value proposition from the innovation side. It's not just you have a great technology, picking and putting people in. The technology should provide value to what it is doing. That's my remarks.
I think Naveenji, you have given the motto of the entire thing, collaborate to disrupt. I think very, very important area, because unless I think the diverse thinking would come together, it will be difficult to disrupt. And I think the madam's example of even blurring to removing the boundaries will happen through collaboration only. So thank you for that. Himanshuji, disruption for you, sir. Thank you.
I think medtech is going through a big change. And as I was talking to ma'am in the afternoon, she talked about 500 startups under her umbrella. And what they are doing, they're disrupting. They are bringing disruptive technologies. And I think how many will be commercialized, that's a question, but I'm pretty sure at least 10% of them can be commercialized. And then, of course, you're talking about smart and intelligent devices. Future of devices is smart with sensors, Today, if you put an IV catheter today, that's only an IV catheter. It's only a drug delivery device. But can it do a blood test? Can it tell you the blood grouping? Because today you waste, precious hours in deciding, talking about the blood grouping, testing the blood grouping of a patient. Can an IV catheter test it? There's a sensor inside built in. Can it do that? So it'll be smart, intelligent devices, miniaturization of technologies, nanotechnology coming into play, and a lot of these disruptions will come in. Look at what digital health will bring in as a transformation. A lot of data will be generated, and that data will help you to give precise drugs drug delivery. And I think that is what is going to happen. I think today we are not relying on data, but data is not there; it's very scarce. So data has to come together, and I think there will be a time when data will be there. US is a lot of cancer drugs have been delivered based on the data matrix, based on the history, what the data they have collected over years. So I think data will play a very important role as a disruptor. And I hope that in next 10 to 15 years, the whole healthcare delivery will change. That's what I see right now. Yeah.
Thank you, Himanshuji. And on that note, let me also inform you that CII has a wonderful platform. It's called DIVE. It's called Disruptive Innovators Voice, where a lot of disruptive innovators across the country, outside the country, come and present their thought process. Please write to CII for more information. It's an amazing platform. And with that, I open the floor for any questions to the panelists. We'll take 2 questions to start with. Yes, the gentleman on the right of mine. Can somebody put a mic to here? Can somebody give a mic here, please? Sir, आप इधर से ले लीजिए.
Hello.
Yeah, please. And
Yeah.
please introduce yourself, sir, and then
Yeah.
identify the panelists you want to put the question to.
My name is Vishal Sanghvi from Bombay. I running my company as an innovation and business accelerator. And COVID pandemic motivated to come into the health tech devices because as my technology resources and research resources there globally. So as a socially challenges, I enter into the health tech devices. But what I found the gap of barriers. Once do the innovation into the public life, we can scale X level. For as a how I want to learn from you what kind of innovation we can do then collaborate. And we see that there is a fund I have invested my 2 crore seed funding into medtech devices to we connected globally about Japan, China, Taiwan to how fastly produce. So what I found challenges because we cannot go to the agencies or government to take the fund because our focus for the immediately solve the challenges. So what I see about first of all whether district level either if I am in Bombay so because you have the fund government run the many programs on state level and central level but as a innovation I have team of 20 people but only in this medtech device only 6 people has joined with me to process.
So sir your question is how to get funding?
फंडिंग नहीं है सर कि ये जो है चैलेंज वो है कि भाई मेडिकल डिवाइस में पीपल विल कैन नॉट ट्रस्ट यू विदाउट हैव अ लॉट ऑफ थिंग्स टू टेस्टिंग एंड एवरीथिंग.
Yeah, sure.
You require the community which trust you.
So penetration I think is the question.
Yes.
How to penetrate a new innovation?
Yeah, it's required the market access also.
Sure. The market access.
Yes. So your subject of is about value chain.
No, what we do is, see, for example, I think Andhra Pradesh is one of those states, we have smart beds, around 120 smart beds. It's that DOSI technology which we have put. So we also talk to a lot of startup entrepreneurs. See, we are open about it. I think Andhra Pradesh is the only government which also has a special secretary digital health also. I think I'm the one who's sitting here. So we are open to it because I come from a very strong technocrat background. We do it. The thing I clearly talked about is value proposition. You bring something, there has to be something in what you.
सर मैं वो चाहता हूँ कि डिस्ट्रिक्ट लेवल पे आए जहाँ पे हम सोशली जो कनेक्टेड है.
आपको हम काम करने के लिए देंगे, बट आपको वैल्यू दिखाना होगा. आप वैल्यू दिखाएंगे.
नहीं ये मैं अपने आज मैं बता रहा हूँ.
सर आप प्लीज सर से कनेक्ट कीजिए पैनल के बाद. आई थिंक ही हैज ऑफर्ड यू टू शो द वैल्यू एंड आई थिंक ही शुड बी एबल टू हेल्प यू आउट इन दैट. सर you can take the mic please.
I'm Dr. Kawar from Key Healthcare. My question to Renu ma'am. Ma'am, still why, there are a lot of maps, the monoclonal antibody not available in Indian market. Why we have to procure from outsource? There are many, many drugs. I'm talking about the life-saving maps. Thank you.
Sure.
See, a connected example I'll tell you is that when we started working on the COVID diagnostics for the Indian domestic market. The first discussion meeting I had with all the diagnostic developers in March, they said they've developed diagnostics for many diseases, but we can't provide COVID diagnostics at that large scale. Why? They can develop the diagnostic, they didn't have the reagents. Now, how difficult is it to manufacture a reagent? The problem was not manufacturing the reagent. The problem was a demand aggregation, a market for that. Having them at affordable cost. Now, giving a reply to your answer, it's not that MABs are not available. You have research on it. But the fact is there a market for it? Is there a value proposition to those MABs that you're bringing in there, or is there already something which is there in the market which is more affordable, which obviously becomes more accessible? So I think today our Indian innovators have to look at now competing with global markets to see what is the value proposition. I like the point Naveen made. Unless you bring that in, so bringing in MABs is not an issue. Your MABs have to be affordable to become accessible in the country. You will compete. Why will people go globally to import if you can get something so much better in India? So you have to work on to that.
Thank you so much, everyone. And I thank my panelists for being with me. Awesomely done. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you. And thank you, audience, for listening to us patiently. Thank you. Thank you, CII, for this opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Vibhav. Thank you to all our panelists.